Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. Excuse the barren bookshelves. I'm in the process of moving. Still determining the final destination. Florida's squeezing us out, which is a shame, but that's alright. New adventures on the horizon. But Jesus Christ, packing up those books, I'll tell you. Today is Dispatches by Michael Herr, published in 1977. Several people have recommended Dispatches to me for some time. That's a polite way of saying people have essentially been saying, read this book, motherfucker, for years now. I'm not certain who recommended it first, but I think it's the viewer who goes by Lion Standing the Second. So thanks to him and thanks to all others who recommended it. And you know, after reading it, well, they were right. They're looking out for me. I appreciate it, guys. Dispatches is a work of new journalism composed of 6 narratives originally published in magazines, based on Michael Herr's experience as a war correspondent for Esquire in the Vietnam War in the late 60s. It's a little confusing, though, because the book is actually not journalism. Much of the book is fiction, but not all of it. How much is and isn't, we'll never know. As the LA Times article by Paul Ciotti linked below informs us, the important moments appear to have been true, but I won't spoil them for you. My favorite title of this book is the French version, Putain de mort, which means goddamn death, or fucking death. Appropriate title. Herr's book is a heavy meditation and reflection on his inner and outer experience of the Vietnam War. This was a book that made him famous. Herr also helped write the narration for Coppola's Apocalypse Now and co-wrote the screenplay for Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. Both great films. Dispatches is better. A lot better. Dispatches is a book about learning what life is by confronting death, by experiencing life in the most extreme environments possible. Right next to death, all the time. It never leaves him. Whether he's awake, asleep, or somewhere in between, it's always there. It's a distillation of all the chaotic surreality of the Vietnam War, a journey through the country and the Americans who fought in it. Saigon, Khe Sanh, the Highlands, China Beach, all these wild, different environments. This thing transcends war journalism and propels itself to the height of the greatest literature, fiction or nonfiction. It's a hybrid. It's something different. I've never read anything quite like it. It's a semi-fictional memoir with philosophical reflections. It's brutal reality blending with imagination, oscillating between dream and nightmare. It captures the psychological truth of war. But that truth is so elusive and complex and contradictory that it seems it can only be approached indirectly by way of a story. A story that contains many fragments of stories, united in a collage. Reading it is like being on a carousel under shellfire. It's wild shit. The book itself is, to quote a line from the song The Pilgrim Chapter 33 by Chris Christopherson, a walking contradiction, partly truth and partly fiction. When you're reading Dispatches, the message of the book, Herr's discovery, is not immediately apparent. It requires a setup. You find yourself wading through a variety of war stories and anecdotes, beautifully written but seemingly random. Only after you get deep into it does it begin to form. Herr's message in Dispatches is one of profound ambiguity. It's that, for how undeniably horrible it is, war is also not entirely bad. In fact, it can be the complete opposite. The worst and the best wrapped up in one. And it can be so powerful that nothing outside of it compares. Naturally, though, as he presents it, it's a Faustian bargain. The way he describes being in war and coming out seems similar to heroin, an unbelievable addictive state of being with the heaviest of withdrawals. And of course, like heroin, it can kill you. A cliche comparison, for sure, but I think it's accurate. Herr carefully avoids contaminating his writing with false machismo or bravado. It's exciting, sure, but there's always a sense of grave clarity. It's nuanced, mature, it's very respectful. But at the same time, he tells it as it is. He isn't saying war is great and everyone who says otherwise is a damned coward. No, not at all. He's just telling the truth as he experienced it. And fear is a big part of it, for him and the soldiers. Sometimes Herr critiques the higher-ups and the book takes on a kind of light Dr. Strangelove tone, showing us the demented optimism of the mission, as Herr refers to it. Like the collective American government officials, the mission. The fact that Herr would go on to work with Kubrick is pretty funny. Herr's not justifying the war or advocating for it, not at all. He doesn't shy away from the visceral horror of the whole thing, and it was horrifying for both the Vietnamese and Americans, obviously. But the story has so much compassion and emotional sensitivity and adrenaline and humor that you begin to get an idea of how fucking bewildering this thing must have been. How indescribable. Herr's book is a lucid acceptance of a stunning contradiction, unclouded by political or moral rhetoric. War is both horrible and magnificent. The truth is irreconcilable. He achieves this through an evocative and poetic telling of his personal story as well as the stories of people he met, soldiers, photographers, and otherwise, depicting the vast range of experience during the war. He's mastered tonal range, right? Shifting into high gear with detailed tactile descriptions of combat and violence, and then shifting back down into, thoughtful observations and insights, and then with occasionally beautiful literary descriptions. Sometimes it has a gritty physicality, other times it has a distant ethereal quality, and sometimes it's just very funny. His comedic timing is solid. He doesn't seem to have any agenda other than just trying to describe it as it was, because to do so is a method of not only understanding the war, but also himself. I don't mean to diminish it, but the book seems to partially have been a kind of therapy. There is a warm sincerity in his writing that inspires trust. In person, he actually reminds me a lot of Philip Seymour Hoffman. I think Hoffman could have done an amazing adaptation. The characters alone are worth the read. Among them are Sean Flynn, the son of Errol Flynn, who disappeared at the Cambodian border, never to be found, along with another character, the photographer Dana Stone, as well as the immortal madman Tim Page. Tim Page kind of reminds me of Gene Harrogate from Suttree, He's something else. You just gotta read it. A great line from the book is the following: "War stories aren't really anything more than stories about people anyway. And that's what the book is about. Stories about people. Very interesting people." After reading it, I know I technically know more about the Vietnam War than I did, but I feel as though I know less than I did, because now I'm aware of just how fucking confusing the whole thing was. Like Herr says in the book, nobody can even agree when this thing started, right? I suppose one of the biggest takeaways from the book would be that to assume that we over here know what it's like to be over there during a war, any war, is beyond foolish. He arrives there just before the Tet Offensive. And my dad was in the Vietnam War. I've told this story before, but my dad was in the Vietnam War. He must have been my stepdad. He wasn't a Marine, but he saw some shit. He was like 18 or 19, something like that. I mean, like real young. That's the thing about the war. All these guys, you look at these photos from the war online and they're so young. I mean, they're so young. I'm 37. I look at these guys. I'm like, holy shit, man. You just can't even imagine. And yeah, my dad was there in Saigon when the Tet started. And he was in a hotel. He was in a hotel on a floor way up, right above the city. At the hotel bar with a bunch of guys, like 300 men, unarmed. And they're drinking and watching the entire thing start from, this vantage point, right? So over the course of the day and into the night, they see the entire, skyline just set on fire, right? He described it like watching Godzilla walk through the city or something. And he said the gunfire was so loud and omnipresent and continuous that it sounded like the ocean. The most obvious question in the book is, why did Michael Herr go to Vietnam? He never explicitly tells us. As well as he's able to articulate so much about the experience, I don't think he knew how to articulate that. I think he wrote the book to try and find the answer. And I don't know if he ever did. It's like the question is, which is stronger? Your biological instinct for self-preservation or your need to know? And I think the answer is simply that, for him, he needed to know. Not only about the war, but himself in it. That kind of dark curiosity is unbearable because, as Herr seems to tell us, you know that if you go, you will change. You will find something big, and it will certainly find you. It's the most radical, dangerous, consequential rite of passage you could ever pursue. Herr's experience is why men are still drawn to war. It's something primal. And like it or not, that's an enormous component of reading the book. And I imagine this is mostly for men, but you can watch yourself experiencing that shit when you read it. For me, the most disturbing thing about reading Dispatches is that, against my better judgment, against my knowledge of all the horrible things I could have experienced or, God forbid, participated in, there's a billion different kind of wounds he talks about. I mean, getting your legs blown off, your arms, your balls. When I read the book, I came to the realization that part of myself was like, damn, maybe I missed out. That would have really been something to experience. I wonder what I would have learned. I wonder who I would have become. Because Herr is describing a space that is otherworldly, an intensity of life that doesn't exist anywhere else. But honestly, snapping back, would I actually go if given the chance? No. No fucking way. It sounds awful. Understatement of the century. In a great documentary linked below called First Kill, directed by Coco Schreiber, Herr says that war is, quote, like weather. It's like a natural disaster. It's virtually unstoppable. So in that film, in Dispatches, Herr seems to be telling us that war is never going away. Ever. It's too powerful. It's intrinsic to human nature. War is nature itself. Primordial. And I suspect he's right. In that same documentary, Herr revealed that he was inspired by Ernest Hemingway. No surprise there. But I believe that was when he was younger. In a brilliant section in Dispatches where Herr describes what it's like to be in a firefight, he also describes the feeling of what it's like when it's over, and he writes the following. And every time you were so weary afterward, so empty of everything but being alive that you couldn't recall any of it, except to know that it was like something else you had felt once before. It remained obscure for a long time, but after enough times a memory took shape and substance and finally revealed itself one afternoon during the breaking off of a firefight. It was the feeling you'd had when you were much, much younger and undressing a girl for the first time. That's heavy. Herr is describing the violent eroticism found within warfare. Herr mentioned Freud in that documentary. In his book Civilization and Its Discontents, I know I'm always talking about it, but it's a good one. Freud explains that we're unhappy in civilization because it requires the repression of our violent and sexual impulses to function. Herr shows us that war unleashes those impulses, and that perhaps they're very similar. They seem to be coming from the same place, as if they're intertwined or something. That's why, after he had to fire at the enemy himself one night to help cover the others, regarding the morning after, Herr wrote the following. I couldn't remember ever feeling so tired, so changed, so happy. There's Freud's elusive happiness, right? All those impulses breaking free. As far as I can tell, that's war. That's why men do it. I'm always talking about how the greatest books are all about sex and death. There you go. You begin to wonder if war is a requirement for a civilization to function because of the repression that Freud identified. A giant release of tension. I think Bataille thought of war in a similar way in his book The Accursed Share, which I haven't read in forever, but I remember really enjoying it. I think he thought of war as a kind of sacrificial expenditure. For Herr, in part, war is an act of stunning catharsis. At the same time, it seemed to have been something like psychological self-destruction. Herr didn't buy the political reasons for the Vietnam War at all. Without being sensational or exploitative, he gives you the crystal clear truth. War can be amazing just as much as it can be horrific. The paradoxical summation of two extremes, right? Everything good and bad and up and down wrapped up in a chaotic, blistering time of life lived at the peak of urgency and beyond. But of course, that's just one perspective gained from reading a book. I'm sure it's a whole different thing to be in the middle of something like that, you know? So ultimately, there's a heavy sense of fatalism in Herr's book. He tells us that sometimes war is awesome. If that's true, and it seems to be, what the hell do you do with that? How can we ever hope to overcome it? Do we really even want to? And if not, what does that say about us? What it says is that after millions of years of evolution, we still don't understand a goddamn thing about ourselves. Leave it to literature to show you that. And I imagine we'll all be dead long before we come anywhere close. But sometimes you just have to marvel at the beautiful catastrophe of it all, you know? I think it's an important book to read now to understand the forces working on you in case those in positions of power want to use them to get you to do what they want. And y'all know what I'm talking about. So, I love the book. I also really hope we do not engage in another war. I really hope we do not. Better than food. 5 out of 5 coffees filled to the fucking brim. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it. It is one of the best books I've ever read. It is also one of the most tragic and compassionate. I haven't even begun to process that. Yeah. You could scarcely do a heavier read, I think. That's about as heavy as it gets, man. So what did I dislike? A good deal of the book is filled with military jargon and geographical information, and for me this was an interruption to the reading flow, trying to get myself oriented. But I understand it was also necessary and it does add to the whole experience, so I'm really struggling to find stuff to criticize, you know. So who should read it? If you enjoy Hemingway, Ernst Junger, and Cormac McCarthy, check it out. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon for making this show possible. And if you'd like to support the show, the link is below. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. Alright, thanks for watching, good to see you, talk to you soon. Ciao!